usually never ask this question because I think it's a little basic. However, I cannot find mention of this anywhere in your book or online. So I want to start with the title of your memoir, which is Wildflower. And I want to know why it was significant to you. Why did you choose that title?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I had a really tough time choosing a title, and I kept going back to this experience that I had with my mom when I was little. We used to make these things called seed bombs. Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so we would take wildflower seeds and we would put that with clay and dirt and we would roll it together into these little balls. And then we would have them in the car when we were going on road trips or just driving around. And whenever we would see like an abandoned piece of land that just looked like it needed a little bit of love or something, we would yell seed bomb and we would throw a seed bomb out the window into a field. And we would know that in a couple weeks there would be flowers that were blooming there. And I think for me, it's about
Wow.
really the idea of seeing the opportunity in like the ugly parts and ugly places, right? Or the places that have been forgotten or left behind. And also just knowing that like you can bloom in unexpected places, right? And you can rely on the world to give you what you need if you are showing up in the space that you're meant to be in, right? And that it's not always going to be pretty and it's not always going to be as we planned it. And sometimes the wind might carry us into a totally different location than what we originally planned on. But if you can just be in alignment with things and be true to yourself, no matter where you are, I think that that's where the beauty is.
That's a beautiful answer. Because as you were talking about it, I also was thinking that you plant seeds in places and don't see them bloom for years because activism is a long game. And so there's also this sort of metaphor there, it feels
Yep.
like the investment.
Absolutely. And a lot of times you have to be planting seeds for other people,
Yeah.
right? It's like a lot of those seed bombs we threw out of the window, we were never going to see those flowers like actually come to bloom, right? But
Yeah.
how much of what we put out in the world do we do for others versus ourselves, right? Like we need to think about that too. It's not just about us as individuals, it's also about our community. And I think that that's where a lot of the beauty is for me.
I really liked learning about your childhood. And you said that fashion was a great unifier in your house growing up, which was different for me because I didn't have that at all. So I
Mhm.
wanted to know what you learned from the women in your life about fashion and the ideas that you took with you that either inspired your own fashion or some ideas that you came up with on your own.
Yeah. So my grandmother had like a very particular relationship with fashion. She was like ultra waspy and like loved an Oscar de la Renta look. You know what I mean? Loved a Carolina Herrera flower print. Like she was that girl, like big earrings, like roller sets in the hair, like lots of blush. Like she would apply blush in this like furious way that like swept like across her cheeks and like up to the hair, right by the ears a little bit. So her hair was like this brilliant gray white, but like right by the ears sometimes would be a little bit pink from like the blush residue strokes. And for her, fashion was just this like very fabulous, glamorous. Like she never wore jeans a day in her life. So it was really like, what do you wear to church on Sunday? And not that she was like particularly wealthy or anything like that, but she would buy a dress and have that dress for 20, 30 years, and like
Right.
have it in her rotation, take good care of things, mend things, and really be thoughtful about how those things looked on her. And she would put on a dress and she would just hold herself differently,
Mm.
And so when I would watch fashion shows with her, she would be like really transported by how beautiful it was or how the women on the runway looked and how they presented themselves and how they embodied the designs, right? Versus my mom, who like never wanted to shave her legs or like conform to anything that felt like it was part of the patriarchy, would be like, well, what is their socio-political message that they're making with this fashion show? You know what I mean? Like, oh, what was the location? What was the venue? Why did they choose that? Oh, who was in the front row? Gloria Steinem? Fascinating. It was like a very different lens of which we would watch our own little
Yeah.
version of the Super Bowl.
It's so interesting because you've really melded the two together,
I think so.
which is very cool. I was kind of surprised to learn that you weren't a great student always because you strike me as somebody who's just excellent all the time. So it was kind of interesting to learn. But you said that when you were in school, you felt underestimated.
Yeah.
And I saw yesterday this beautiful clip from the Kelly Clarkson show. And I think Henry Dumler, what's his name? The Fonz from
Oh my gosh, I don't even know that person's name. I know who you're talking about though.
he's
Uh-huh.
like the most kind man. Every time I interview him, he has a wise word. And Kelly said, that her daughter was being bullied for not being able to read well. And he said into the camera, just because you learn a different way doesn't make you any less brilliant.
Yep.
And it caught fire on the internet because I think we're finally starting to talk about different ways to learn and different intellects, different brilliance. There's so many different ways to be smart. And so I wanted to know, as you reflect on that feeling of being underestimated, what do you think helped you overcome that most?
Hmm. I think my mom shows up as a pretty complicated character in this book, right? But I will definitely say, like, she was always like, she would be very curious about my teachers. Like, she would say, oh, like, how did they decide to try to teach this lesson?
Hmm.
Like, she would help me understand that they were using their own process, right? Or she would be like, oh, what did you learn today? Like, the straw that broke the camel's back for me in high school was history class, because I actually didn't agree with how they were teaching history. And my mom taught me this incredible Nigerian proverb growing up where she said, until the lion has a historian, the hunter will always be the hero.
Till the lion has oh wow.
Right.
Oh my God, that has completely informed your life.
Totally.
That gave me chills when you said it
Totally.
because you're trying to be a voice for some of the lions.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so for me, like, she would be like, oh, like,
Mhm.
what did you learn today in science, right? And it's like, oh, okay, like, is that up to date? And like, is the person that's teaching you science a believer in science? And when you're in like grade 9, you're like, mom, what are you talking about? Like,
Mhm.
like, I don't know. And she's like, you should ask them.
Your mom is really interesting.
Like, she would be like, don't trust the source automatically. Like, who validated the source for you? You know?
I can't
And
believe she would
even,
say that when you were so young. It's like gives
oh
you a
my
lot to
God,
think about.
totally. Even she sometimes would say something to me and she'd be like, but don't trust me. I would be like, oh my God. Or like, I would be like, mom, like, can you like bring over like a chair or something? And she would be like, what's a chair?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that object over there, like, bring the chair, And she's like, oh, well, this. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I understand that that's a chair to you, but was that the intention behind the person that actually designed that object? I'm just curious. And it's so fascinating because now it's so silly at the same time. Like, I have this chair in my kitchen that like is a chair, but like you actually can't really sit on it because it's a design object. And it really reminds me of like my mom and these conversations about perception, right? And like you can put one thing into the world and have a plan for that thing, an idea for that thing, but how another person receives it is completely different. And so often in communication, and people get really hung up on my grandmother in this book because she's the one that teaches me the N word. But like so often in communication, you have to listen to what people are actually saying. Like what I could say to you, and I was having this conversation with someone yesterday who said something to me, and I was like, wait, like, are you actually saying that to me? Or are you saying this completely other different thing?
I took a Kabbalah class one time, and
Mm-hmm.
the rabbi says that he teaches everybody this communication tool. It's very therapeutic too, that you repeat what you think the other person says, and then you say,
Totally.
"Did I understand you correctly?" Because half the time you'll say, like, "Can you pick up eggs and chicken from the grocery store?" And somebody's like, "Okay, I'll pick up cheese and eggs from the grocery store."
Right. Totally. Totally. No, it's so fascinating. And I love that you had that experience. I also had that experience at Kabbalah class with my mom because she would take me to Kabbalah class. Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
god,
yeah.
I need to meet your mom. Is she coming to any of your book talks?
I'm sure she probably will. I'm sure she probably will. Let's hope. Let's hope. I know that's a popular question.
So, how do you feel about identity? Because the foreword or the intro to your book,
Mhm,
like the
mhm,
synopsis I received before I got to actually read your book,
mhm,
felt so much about and I'm obsessed with identity.
mhm.
Honestly, it's pretty controversial now because everyone's like, do we talk about it? Do we not talk about it? Can you share with everybody a little bit about your background and how you feel about identity?
Yeah, sure. I'm so curious about how you feel about identity as well, because it's like it really is such a personal thing, right?
It's like the lens through which I see the world, honestly, in a lot of ways.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think that's also how I feel about it, right?
Mhm.
And then there's also other identities that people can ascribe to you, which is part of the reason why I also wanted to write this book, right? To like be my own historian and share my own experience of how I've been seeing the world and how I metabolize some of these things that happened around me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's all really complicated. It's like, yes, like I'm a Black woman. I'm also a white woman because my mom was white, right? Like I'm American. I'm also Canadian. I'm also Ghanaian. I'm also like of Earth. I believe
Right.
certain parts of
Do you consider yourself, like, connected to Jamaican identity
Oh,
at all?
yeah, right, like, also that, because I went to school there, right, for
Right.
so many, like, very formative years of my life, and there's a lot of people who actively refer to me as Jamaican, and I feel like Jamaica is a huge part of my identity as well, right? I've spent more
Mhm.
time there than Ghana, and I'm technically Ghanaian, so and it's we also I talk a lot about like chosen family versus biological family as well. Like my mom was adopted at birth, and I'm an only child, and so there's chosen family is a big part of my life too.
Mhm.
And I mean, identity is it's a complex topic. Tell me about your relationship with it. I'm so curious.
I think I've always seen everything through the lens of gender in a lot of
Hmm.
ways, and in the last few years, that's probably been widened for me because of a new understanding of what gender is in our
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
I do I kinda see, like, politics, pop culture, all of it at the intersection of gender, race, and religion
Hmm.
always.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's why I love pop culture because I think those are really complicated topics, and pop culture gives us a water cooler way of exploring them. I think we saw that
Really
with
well said.
Caitlyn Jenner
Hmm.
in so many ways.
Hmm.
We were never talking about transgender rights in this country before then. So
No, 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 we really weren't, not at the scale that we are now, and it's really fascinating, and it's also so people's pacing. Like, I was on a plane the other day from Charlotte, North Carolina. Oh, where was I? I was going from the Cayman Islands to Charlotte, North Carolina, so it's a very
okay.
specific flight, girl. And I was sitting next to these two men who were just dying to engage in conversation. And some of the language that they were using, first of all, I was like, okay, I'm about to spend a lot of emotional capital in this conversation, right? But here we go, because sometimes, you get sat in a middle seat for a reason. And like we have like there's such a learning curve, right, for people, and what people are and aren't exposed to in their daily lives plays such a huge role on their ability to understand things, and how their own comfort in their own lives really informs their fear or lack thereof as well.
Mhm.
And fear plays such a huge role in acceptance. um, and it's just like all so incredibly complicated, and I try not to I don't know, I have a lot of friends that are just like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that this person said this, like they just are the worst. And I'm like, I don't think they're the worst, I think they're probably confused, right?
I
i,
feel very
I
similarly to you.
Yeah, I think that there's like probably some conversations that could be had. I think there might also be like a learning moment in it for me, because obviously that person hasn't been getting the information in a way that makes sense to them, right? And I love to talk to people who have a difference of opinion. Um, to me, I think, listen, I was also vegan for 10 years. I talk a lot about that experience in the book. Like what it's like to be vegan and then end up working with so many, animal products, and what my decisions were there and how that relates to sustainability for me, and what it means to try to enforce like a vegan agenda onto like small groups of tribes in Africa, like why that's crazy, but like is maybe cute, like if you can shop at Erewhon in LA, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we love that, girl, but it doesn't work in the same way in the Omo Valley. And so these conversations are complicated, right? Like I'm not saying that being vegan is bad, of course. Like I should probably be vegan again, but I am saying that it might be complicated to be vegan in the Omo Valley of Ethiopia, right?
Yeah. It could be complicated to be Ethiopian in anywhere, honestly. Like
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of nuance to these things.
Absolutely. And we don't like to leave a lot of space for nuance these days.
Yeah.
We want things to be right or wrong, black or white. This person's good or bad. And I'm like, we all fall in the spectrum.
I think after hearing you say that, that's why I felt so connected to your writing.
Mm.
I think memoirs in a lot of ways oftentimes will it's a publishing thing. It's not necessarily the writer, but publishers want a takeaway. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes the takeaway is just the lived experience and it's not like you're a badass, you know?
Right.
I liked that you had so much nuance. You talk about some early exposure to the fashion industry through modeling.
Hmm.
And you write that it struck you as a system designed to keep women down and reinforce that they are always replaceable.
Oof, yes.
That hit me, and I don't know if I'm, personalizing this because in what I do as a TV host, you're always replaceable, and
Hmm.
actresses, I think, have the same thing.
Yes.
But I think regardless of industry, if you are a young, ambitious woman, there's this idea of being grateful for the job, grateful for the experience. And I interviewed Jamel Hill a few months ago, and she said that gratitude will keep you from getting a paycheck. And I never forgot it.
Wow.
So I want to hear what you think about um, that replaceable factor. Has it shown up in other ways for you? Did that feeling as a model show up later in romantic relationships?
Definitely.
Really?
Oh my God. I feel like it shows up all the time still. I mean, and it's complicated too, right? Because like there can only ever be one final rose. Like these narratives are like, not only are we replaceable, we actively have to be in competition to not get replaced,
Yeah. And
right?
to be the one.
And to be the one. And I think that that's like super duper damaging because when you feel that way, and also if you feel like you're in competition with other women, you're going to start leaving parts of yourself behind, right? To be able to run the race faster. It's like, okay, like what part of myself can I just sacrifice in order to lighten the own load of who I am as a person, right? Instead of showing up in the space with my full set of needs, I'm just going to abandon some at the door to be more digestible, right? I'm just going to get like thinner to take up less space. I'm going to do all of these things to strip away just to be like a little bit easier to hold.
Yeah.
I was actually like a guy that was telling me this quote yesterday that was attributed to Gloria Steinem, but we couldn't figure out if it actually was her. But it was women need men like fish need bicycles.
Like we don't at all?
Yeah.
Is that the point?
Yeah,
That's funny.
I know. And I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. But like, I love the concept that it could be true. I mean, listen, like for Gloria Steinem, perhaps it is true, right?
Yeah. I think there's, a power in wanting and not needing,
Yeah, I
right?
agree with that too.
'Cause I do think that there's, like, a wave of feminism that upsets a lot of people where it feels like man-hating, and that's not it.
No, listen, here's the whole thing. I actually love men a lot, okay? And and the other day I like span out this whole theory where I was like, "Oh guys, like actually I've decided I have a whole new strategy for how I want to parent." And my friends were like, "Oh, fabulous. Like what is it?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I think, what I would prefer to do is actually create embryos with 5 of my favorite men and have 5 children with each a different man. And the ask would be that each of those men co-parent all 5 of the children, you know?
Oh, so they don't parent their own, they all co-parent 5.
Uh-huh.
That is fascinating. Also kind of like a science experiment.
Is it getting like weird and like Elon Musky? Because that was not the goal. But
No,
I mean,
I think it's it's sort of interesting too because I forgot who said this to me one time, but there was a guy who was like, I want to procreate with 5 or 10 different women because I want to see what like every ethnicity of me would look like.
oh wow,
Like,
that's
oh
very
my God.
narcissistic. Yeah, that's fascinating. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of was just like, my friend was like, "Oh, is it because like your dad died, and so now you just like want 5 dads for your own kids? It's like a backup plan, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5." And I was like, maybe. I mean, I think what's more interesting is just letting the mind wander. Like, what happens when you like hit unsubscribe for a second from the white picket fence and just like let your mind wander? Because also, like, I love a platonic relationship. Like I mean, I also love a non-platonic one, but like my platonic male friends are so important and special and amazing. And I feel like I've gotten them all as like these bright, brilliant gifts from the sun that are just like in my life and feed me in so many amazing ways. Right. And I sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like you would be the absolute best father. Like, I don't know why you haven't done that yet. Right. And they obviously have their whole host of different issues, which I don't have to wade into because I'm not their romantic partner. I'm just their very good friend. Right. So I don't know. For me, I just like the idea of allowing space for my mind to wander because I've spent so many years like subscribing to just like these specific things that are also beautiful.
I feel very similarly. I think I grew up and felt like there was one way to do something. And you grow up, and even in journalism, you're supposed to ask the question, who wrote the piece and who was it written for,
Hmm.
so that you can understand the bias in it. And it's kind of beautiful when you can open your mind and think, well, what if this wasn't the rule? Who wrote the rule? Could we do it a different way?
Right. Exactly. Totally.
So, speaking of rules,
Hmm.
you were arrested for dangerous
Hmm.
driving when you were in college.
Yeah.
And I only bring it up because I feel like it spurred a very poignant moment where you learned about justice at a
Yeah.
pretty young age. So it actually led to a court appointed job helping women in an organization called Dress for Success. But I'm wondering if you can kind of share that story for everybody.
Yeah, sure. So I like picked up this like very dangerous habit of street racing. It was very fast and the furious, pretty embarrassing. My car was pink. Did I write that in the book? Did I make a visual of the car? I
Oh,
did.
yeah. It
Oh
was
wow.
very
Yeah.
descriptive. But why did you get into it?
You know,
Have you
I
explored that in therapy?
no, I probably need, well, yes, I mean, a little bit. I think, to be honest with you, and it's like a little bit dark, but I think I was just really like fumbling with my own mortality.
Yeah.
I think I was just like trying to take my life into my own hands in some way. And I think I was trying to like outperform men. I think I was trying to like prove to them that like they needed to stop underestimating my power.
That's huge. Do you
Right.
feel that way in other areas of life? Like if you're in the gym, do you want to run faster than the guy next to you on the treadmill, or
No.
no, you're kind of over that?
Yeah, I think I'm over that. I used to be like fiercely competitive, and I think I'm kind of over that now. Like now I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, like you're running on the treadmill. Can I just pause mine and you can take this next lap for me, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at that time, I just I think it was exactly that. This is my therapy session. Thank you. I think it really was about this idea of just like wanting to prove to men that like I did have my own power, right? And I actually could beat them. Even with like less experience and like less sharp tools.
What I find fascinating about that is ultimately you land in a jail cell and it's all of these other women that
Mhm.
fight for you.
Mhm.
And I got chills reading it because it's these other women who you just met who are
Yep.
also in jail
Yep.
who are screaming and rioting for you.
Totally. Totally.
So for people who haven't read the book, um, correct me if I'm wrong, but the synopsis of the story, as I understood it, is that you weren't told why you were put there. And so
Yeah.
they all start fighting for you.
Yeah. So basically, so I had taken up street racing and was unfortunately racing everywhere I was going. And I got pulled over on my way to school, and then I got pulled over again, and like kind of just decided maybe not to pull over, which was like where the big fail comes in there. And so I got arrested, and then I was put in a holding cell, and then I was moved into like a larger jail. And I was given a phone call, but I called my roommate and she didn't answer the phone. So sort of no one knew where I was, and it was unclear to me with what I was getting charged with or what the process would be. And I didn't get the due process that I was supposed to get. And so I was just like in this cell somewhere. I didn't even really know where anymore. I was just crying for hours and hours and hours and hours. And yeah, a couple women in the cell just asked me what the hell was going on. And then the other women in the cell block overheard and kind of made a riot until they sent someone to actually figure out what was going on with me.
It was pretty powerful.
I'm very lucky. And I learned what happens when women, even women who have been completely discounted, decide to raise their voices in unison and ask for something to happen.
The unison part is so powerful for women. We saw it with the Me Too movement.
Yep. And they spend so much time, by the way, trying to lock us up and silence us. And it terrifies people when women join forces and start speaking their needs,
I
right?
mean, I think about some of the most influential social activism groups in the country over the last few years. I think like the movement Me Too and Time's Up at one point was influential. Moms Demand Action has made the most
Mhm.
progress for gun violence out of
Mhm.
anybody. Women are really powerful, especially collectively, and we've
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So you talk about an early job at Gen Art, and you say people in fashion did not seem happy. We're going to get into your sort of experience in fashion in a deeper way, but can you elaborate on what you felt from them?
A lot of the people that I was intersecting with just felt like they were on this grind and it was kind of unclear as to why. It didn't feel like they were being totally fulfilled by the work. And then some of the people who did seem like they were being fulfilled, the things that were fulfilling them were also not things that I valued or knew would fulfill me as a human. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So your company, Brother Vellies, is a label that stated "Made in Africa" was a foreign concept to people, and you aim to change that. So when something is made in Africa, what meaning does that hold for you?
I think for me, it was this whole idea within fashion of like, okay, made in Italy is valued, made in France is valued, but that's kind of it, right? And so to me, when I was actually traveling in Africa and looking at these artisan communities and watching them and their craft, I was like, wow, like this is just as intricate as what they're doing in Paris, right? And why are we not holding this in such high regard? Or even, I work a lot in Mexico now as well, and like the way that they work with leather and then weave leather and tan leather, dye it. It's just like so beautiful, right? And the quality of some of those materials are on par with, Louis Vuitton, right? But it's like, okay, what is the unconscious bias that like keeps us from valuing, things that originate in one place over the other? And I think for me, knowing that so many things that we hold dear in fashion actually, and concepts and ideas and styles and patterns and trends actually originated from indigenous communities in Africa or other parts of the world, like, was really fascinating. And I wanted to find a way to like elevate that and involve them in the conversation.
It's so clear that fashion and activism run parallel in your life. Um, was there a pivotal moment in which you realized they had to be tandem?
I think it was around like women's reproductive rights,
Mhm.
because I think for me, um, as someone whose mom has had an abortion and as someone who's elected to have an abortion myself, and have thought about all the ways in which my life would be different if I hadn't made that decision for myself, right? And I'm the first to understand that like it's not the right decision for everybody, and hopefully no one ever has to make that decision, right? But I believe that women should have that option. And I think for me, when some of those rights were being threatened several years ago, the first inkling that I had that some of those rights were being threatened, it just seemed so obvious that I was going to need to communicate to my customer base, like, hey, like, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking we should do. This is how I'm going to donate a proceeds from our sales. And
Mhm.
with a lot of my colleagues in fashion, I remember having so many conversations where they were like, oh my God, no, like we get so much revenue from, you know, certain red states that may have a different agenda there. Like we cannot, advocate for Planned Parenthood or any of these other organizations because it would just be so bad for sales. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel that way. like, to me, it's
Yeah.
okay to lose those sales. I know that the majority of my customers want that kind of access. And now that I feel like I have built a platform
Mhm.
largely on like their support, it would be so disingenuous to not turn around and support them with the platform that they've helped give me. So if it means that we get a 30% drop in revenue, like it's okay, because I need to stay honest to what got me here.
I feel very similarly to you. I wanna state that. But I think the argument I hear all the time in contrast to that is businesses, small or large, can't afford to make that decision. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that that's an individual choice, right? Like in a lot of ways, one could argue that like my business, Brother Vellies, like hasn't been able to afford to make any of the decisions that we've made, which is also, by the way, like why we're not the size of Michael Kors.
Mhm.
You know, it's like there are certain things that I design that I'm only ever going to be able to produce a small amount of.
Mhm.
And for some people, they would be like, okay, well, then you need to change your design so that you can make, 50,000 of these things. And I think for me, I'm like, no, like, I don't want to, because that's not what the mission is.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it really depends on, what your goals are in terms of success. And even for me, and I think it's like kind of clear in the book because I talk about like a lot of the financial struggles I had when I was launching the business. Like I had to pick up doing other work on multiple occasions in the early years of the business just to make sure that I could like cover, the expenses that I had at different points. And I think, thank goodness for social media, because I remember one time there was another designer who said to me, like, we were at the CFDA, we were doing a talk or whatever, and she got up and someone had just asked me a question about direct to consumer sales and how I was using social media to drive traffic to our website and try to drive more sales and direct to consumer. And she got up and she made this like really mean sort of statement about like how she was a real designer and like she shouldn't be expected to have to like parade outfits around social media, like, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm happy for you. Like I'm happy for you that you don't have to do that. But like in my case, like I actually can't afford to advertise right now. So I have to use any means that are around me that's essentially free. And if I had, the privilege to not have to ever do that, then like that would be fab, but that doesn't happen to be like my experience. So we all have different levels of comfort and things that we're willing to do, not do. And at the same time, like if I wasn't willing to do any of that, then maybe I would be less willing to, alienate some of my customer base by posting about reproductive justice. Right. So there's trade-offs
Yeah.
sometimes.
I also feel like what a privilege not to care, right? It's like in
Right.
politics, in social justice and all of it. It's what a privilege.
Oh, totally. I was talking to this other guy the other day who like worked in crypto, and he was like, who is the vice president again? And I was like, crazy.
Yeah. I actually had a few, I'll never forget this. I had a few friends when Trump was elected. I was so upset and they were like, it's fine. Like if you need an abortion, you'll be able to get one. And I was like, what kind
Right.
of like that's so wild to me. I vote for the person who has the least amount of rights, not my own interests.
Right. Totally.
It's bizarre. Yeah.
Crazy. That part's like really brutal.
I
Really
think
brutal.
back to your financial struggles. I really enjoyed that part of the book. Not that you struggled,
Yeah.
um, but I was surprised to learn all of the setbacks you faced with your line. And you detail that you faced a lot of it because of a bad contract. But um, all during that time, Beyonce and Rihanna are wearing your clothes, and you're too scared to tell anybody that you're having all of this financial strain, which is how it goes, right? It's like a fake it till you make it thing. And then once you make it, you can talk about it
Right. Totally.
if you so choose. You strike me as somebody who wants to walk through the world with authenticity. Um, I feel like your insides not matching your outsides at that point in time must have been really painful.
Yeah, I think it also came back to like what the idea of success is, right? Like for me, it wasn't ever with Brother Vellies about financial success. It was really about, okay, how do we share the work that these artisans are doing and make sure that they can stay employed? And that was what was happening, right? And so that part of the equation, the part that I set out to do, was the part that was super successful, right? And the other part, like the financial part where I'm supposed to be like making money or like paying my own rent, like that part was like the part that wasn't working, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like focusing on what the goal was for me and the execution of that goal was what was really bringing me the most joy, and the other part felt like a ransom.
In 2020, you started the 15% pledge with an
Ooh,
Instagram post.
yeah.
And you said at the time that companies were absolutely clamoring to participate in social entrepreneurship, which is not the answer. So, what is the magic to the 15% pledge?
So I think for me, there were a lot of retailers at that time that were just like making donations, right? We saw that a lot. And I think, a couple days after George Floyd died, there was a friend of mine called me on behalf of a major retailer, and she was like, they just donated $10 million to the NAACP. And I was like, that's cute. It's a lot of money. We love that. But like, if your friend makes a racist comment, you're not like, oh my God, Jack, that was so racist. Like, make a donation,
Mm.
right? Like, you actually are like, Jack, like, that was racist. Let me talk to you about why. And you kind of try to unpack the ideology that informed the statement that he made. And I think what I was kind of saying to her was like, if we want major retailers or major corporations at all to really kind of step into racial justice in a meaningful way, they need to do it with the thing that they're good at.
Mhm.
Right. And she was like, well, what does that mean? And I was like, well, in the case of like the retailer that she was calling me about, I was like, and listen, I had been reading all these crazy statistics. There's over 40% of Black owned brands were expected to close as a result of the pandemic.
Wow.
90% didn't get access to the first round of PPP money. And I said to her, Black people are almost 15% of the population. Major retailers should commit 15% of their shelf space to Black owned businesses, right? I knew that Black owned businesses were like the heart of the Black community, and they knew that they were dying out. And she was like, whoa, like, I don't think that they're going to do that. And I was like, okay, well, you can just tell them like that's what I said. And we got off the phone, and I really just sat down and thought about what would happen in the American economic landscape if major retailers started making that commitment, right? Thought about venture capital. And, at that time, only 39 Black women had ever raised $1 million in VC money, which is so crazy. And I
It
thought about,
honestly still hasn't gone up that much. I just interviewed Winnie Harlow because she was one of those women, and the
yeah,
number has not increased.
Well, yeah, it's just over 200 now, but it's still like very low, think when you think about it. It's like Adam Newman from WeWork has raised more money than like all the black women combined. And except for Melody Hobson. But so so yeah, I was just thinking about that landscape and how it could really shift if these major retailers across the country started committing in that way, right? Like venture
Mhm.
capital would actively be seeking them out, and it would really turn the tables. And so I wrote all of that down in the notes section of my phone, which I think is where most of our brilliant ideas sort of hibernate. I screenshot it an hour later and I posted it to social and I tagged a bunch of retailers that I thought would do a really good job at taking the idea of the 15% pledge. And so that was a Saturday. I stayed up overnight on Sunday with my web designer so we could launch a petition on Monday at noon. By like Tuesday or Wednesday, I think we had like 100,000 signatures. On Wednesday, I registered to become a nonprofit, and on day 10, Sephora became the first major corporation to commit to the idea of the 15% pledge. And since then, we've announced 29 pledge takers, and they all sign multi-year contracts with us. Nordstrom, for example, is a 10-year contract. So every quarter we get together with them, we do a little audit, we make a recommendation of Black-owned brands that make sense for their shelves, that are amazing products. And through those contractual commitments, we're now in the process of reallocating over $10 billion of annual revenue a year to Black-owned businesses, and we've onboarded over 600 onto the shelves of our pledge takers.
With such foundational change, not just a donation, like you said, right? Like
Yeah.
that changes the course of how people do business in the future too. I can't believe that you went from an Instagram post about corporate accountability to running one of the fastest growing nonprofits in America. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy, right? And one of my favorite parts in the book is how I talk about this group of like anonymous volunteer women that we had in the beginning, right? And those women to me feel like the same women that were in that cell block with me, right? Because it's like, how do we do this together? How do we get, okay, we've decided what we feel like
Yeah,
needs to happen here, right? How do we raise our voices in unison and get this job actually done?
it's beautiful. Anna Wintour said you found a way to bring grassroots activism seamlessly into corporate America. You know, the people that listen to Pretty Smart are such dreamers and doers, and like it's such a beautiful community. Everybody stands for something. For people who work in their respective fields and want to incorporate activism into their own work, what do you say to them?
Oh my gosh. So, a few things. One is roll with your passion, roll with what you know, roll with that thing that's like, the pea under your mattress. What is that? The Princess and the Pea? Sorry, that's like very specific reference. Like the
I
thing that
love
keeps
that though.
you up at night. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And think about the ways in which like business as usual is holding us back instead of pushing us forward, and challenge those things. Like to me,
Mhm.
constantly, like one of the hardest things for me now is like not to just be constantly like throwing myself into other industries and being like, how can we rethink this? How can we rethink this? How can we rethink this? And there's so much opportunity for change and growth. And there are so many people that are actually also craving it, right? Like I get all these women all the time who are like, oh my God, I want to quit my job and like come work at the 15% pledge. And I'm like, well, I would love that because we're hiring. But at the same time, right, you may be exactly where you need to be
Mhm.
to impact it and affect a huge amount of change
Right, in exactly what you're doing now.
in exactly what you're doing now. And the fact that you're even thinking that way, like, is the first step.
I was so struck by how great you are at saying no to things.
Oh, that's good.
Incredible. I'm working on it.
Okay, okay, okay.
Um, is there anything that you wish you would have said yes to looking back?
Yeah. I think,
And it's okay if the answer is no.
oh, it's yes. The answer is definitely yes. It's a little off topic, but I think like probably yes to like more exploration of people. I think I've been like pretty like guarded with myself and my level of vulnerability that I've been able to be like I have close friends, and then I also oddly feel like my social media community is also like my close friends. But I
Yeah.
feel like with just randomly meeting some people, sometimes I'm like still like pretty guarded.
Mhm.
And I think like that's also extended to partners, right? And I think that like it's okay to like, touch a hot surface and get burned sometimes. Like you're going to be able to heal.
That's really brave of you because it
Oh,
means you're facing all of it.
thanks. Yeah. It's like, I think I'm at a different point in my life right now where I'm like, actually want to fall in love with someone that I know it won't work out with.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody say that.
Because it doesn't have to be about this end that we're envisioning, right? Like the
Yeah.
real trick, I think, is about being truly present, like
Mm.
in a moment with someone. Like that's what love's about. It's not about projecting these ideas of the future onto another person,
Oh my god, you're making me emotional, you're right.
you know? So it's like, how do you like full body fall in love with someone that like is not going to be your person at the end, but you just can love them like wholly for who they are in that moment and see them and see them and not try to change them into being your forever person. Like see them, fall in love with them fully knowing they're not your forever person and that you guys are going to break each other's hearts because because you don't want to let that other person compromise.
Have you ever felt fully known in a relationship?
No.
Are you craving that?
I don't know that it's possible.
I used to crave it so much, and I realized that you can give it to yourself. I never thought that was possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to my friend's therapist the other day.
Like, at a
Yeah.
dinner, or how do you get to your friend's therapist?
Yeah, I was like, I want to talk to her on the phone. Like, can I call? I like have questions. And she was saying to me this whole thing about like sometimes in the beginning of love, the body and the mind and the heart wants to go to this place that's almost like a womb like state where you believe that the other person just like intuitively understands you and all of your needs in the way that like the umbilical cord in the womb just provided all of the nourishment and the right heat and the right environments and conditions for you to like grow and be and bloom and know, right? Like the womb and your mom are the first thing that ever fully totally know you and give you exactly what you need. And so sometimes in the beginning of a relationship, like that trigger happens within us and we're looking to replicate that experience again from the womb. And we make these assumptions that people are going to like know and understand parts of us that like they wouldn't, that we just magically think that they're going to know because we're going back into that place.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that can also be really hard on people because it's like, well, no, like they're not your womb, right? Like you have to be able to voice your needs. And I think with women, like we're so quick to not want to be able to voice our needs, right? Even me, I'm like leaving my needs at the door, like just like it's okay. But like
It's even really small, like, what movie do you wanna watch tonight?
totally, totally.
Right.
Please. The other day I got looped into watching a 3-hour French art house film at a theater and I wanted to die.
Oh, no, oh, no.
Through, I was like, I'm just gonna fall asleep because actually, like, I don't want to watch this. And
I hope he was really cute.
thankfully, he was. Yeah, that was, that was the only saving grace for it.
Good.
Truly. Yeah.
So one of the last chapters of your book is called Planting Seeds. It
Mm.
felt so well titled.
Mm.
What seeds are you planting now?
Oh my gosh. I hope that this book is a seed, right? I hope this book can be my own seed bomb and, spread to different people and help them see themselves in the pages in different ways, right? Because while it is my story, I also feel like it's so many of our stories because it touches on so many things that I know that we've all felt at different times, right? And it might play out a little bit differently, but ultimately, like we all have complicated relationships with our moms, right?
You know, your book made me feel like that was okay
Yes. Thank you.
because
Good. It is. Okay.
but I interview a lot of people who they'll email me after our interview. They don't care about talking about their spouse. They don't care talking about like they'll break news with me. They will email me and say, "I said something about my mom that I shouldn't have said. Can you take that part out?" There's
Oh,
some things it's so interesting.
that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, listen, because like we also just don't want to give women space to just be women, right? We have to be a mom, we have to be a wife, we have to be a girlfriend, we have to be a glass ceiling breaker, right?
And there's something about the imperfection that we're not willing to acknowledge.
Yeah, but that's so limiting for all of us, right? Like, it's so limiting for all of us. It's sort of like, well, after I launched the 15% pledge, and because I was like working in business,
Mhm.
whenever I would do a photo shoot, like people would try to get me to wear a blazer. And I'm like, I have never worn a blazer, like almost ever, you know?
That is so funny on it's so funny on so many levels.
It's
Well, you
fascinating.
were part of the girl boss era.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
No,
right.
and you're a wildflower. You're not a
Yeah.
blazer wearing gal.
I'm not a blazer wearing gal, and who had never really been photographed in like before it was like,
Mm.
always like these like prairie dresses and stuff, like lace, long dresses. That was everyone was pulling these looks. Then suddenly the pledge happens and I'm like in a suit, like an Armani. I'm like, what is happening here? No, we don't have to do this. You don't have to force me in this box for my message to actually be digestible
And valuable.
and valuable, right? And my mom doesn't have to lose who she is as a woman in order to be a mom.
I started with a basic question. I'm gonna end with a basic question.
Yeah.
If people take one thing away from your book, what do you want it to be?
Define success on your own terms. And I know that's very Pollyanna,
Mhm.
but I think like that's how we get happy, right? Is when we have our own definition. Because otherwise, like you're just going to keep going and going and going and pushing, right? And it's life is about the journey, not the destination. It's always like, you know, you're one job away, you're one relationship away, you're 5 pounds away. You're always like, we're always waiting to be happy. And we need to seize that now. And also, like, we need to do everything that we can to support each other as women. Because they say in the book, like, stumbling is evidence of momentum, right? So when you see someone stumbling, help them, help them, right? And
Go
like,
out of your way to help them.
go out of your way, and like odds are good that they're going to help you. But by the way, even if they don't next time, that's okay, because a lot of the times you help people for helping yourself.
Yeah. It's so interesting when I take calls with people that are, like, looking for career advice, I often find myself needing what I'm telling them probably more than they need it. There's always
Totally.
a lesson learned.
The teacher always learns more than the student.
Yeah. Okay, we do a rapid fire at the end of
Okay, I'm
every
ready. I'm
interview.
ready. I'm
So,
ready.
a Black designer that you think everybody should know about?
Christopher John Rogers.
Oh, so good.
So good.
So good.
So good.
A movie that you turn on when you're sad?
Great Expectations.
Really?
I know, yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow, Ethan Hawke. So fascinating. I can't tell this story the way it happened. I can only tell you the story the way I remember it.
Mm.
Have you ever noticed that every single thing in that movie is green? You have to watch it again. Every single thing in that movie is green.
What do you mean?
Everything in the movie is green. Everything she wears, every object in the
Huh.
film, everything is green.
I have to go back and watch.
You gotta watch. It's fascinating, and it just shows like how sometimes we don't even really have any understanding of what the heck is going on, and
Yeah,
how much can like slip by us, and what we want to see and what we don't want to see.
that part.
Yeah.
A place that you haven't been yet that you wanna travel to?
Japan.
Ooh, that's good. A life enhancer that you wish you knew about sooner?
Ooh, that's a very good one. Maybe like fish oil. I feel like
That's
it's been like a
great.
real godsend for my skin, hair, and nails.
Omega 3s.
Yeah, totally.
The best gift you've ever given?
A goodbye.
Mm. What do you turn to when you need a dose of nostalgia?
Ooh, playlists.
Your best negotiating tip?
Start high.
It's true.
Yeah.
A book that changed your life, something you think everybody should read?
Oh my gosh. Everything by Bell Hooks.
Yes, I retweet that.
Yeah.
I was so excited to interview you, but I felt like once I read your foreword that we were meant to meet because
Oh,
a huge line in it is you say, "Question everything."
Mhm, mhm.
And about a year and a half ago, I launched a card game of questions titled Question
Oh my
Everything.
gosh, I love that.
And I pull one at the end of every interview. So since we're virtual, you'll just tell me when to stop.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I need this deck of cards. Okay, stop.
This is okay. So I always feel like books come to people when they're meant to. And anytime I pull a card, it's so that people get the one they're meant to get. Do plants thrive or die in your care?
That was the question?
Yeah.
Oh my god, wow. They die and are reborn in my care. So this
Ooh,
plant, this one that's behind me, like I don't even know how well you can see it,
it's
but
beautiful.
literally all of the leaves, every single leaf dropped off of it like 10 days ago. And over the last 10 days, it has literally, I can't even, like, my assistant was like, what's happening? Every single leaf has grown back like rapid fire.
Did you put it in sunlight or what did you do?
No, it's been in the exact same place on the exact same water schedule the entire time. And it's like sometimes parts of you have to die so that other parts can be reborn.
I love how you're so metaphorical in the most beautiful way. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
This is something I ask everybody, and it's intentionally broad. So, whatever comes to you. What is the smartest decision you've ever made?
To not let my friends doubt about the idea of the 15% pledge that day stop me from being vulnerable and posting that ask very publicly online.
I I'm sort of enthralled by what you've built because I think so many of the amazing organizations and groups that were started in 2020 during Black Lives Matter have not been able to cut through, and it's not their fault, but yours has been so impactful.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I really appreciate that.